last week on the Nicoletti Show. So without further ado, let's welcome Angela to the show. Angela, we did it.
Your trademarks are a really important part of your brand identity. And if you would like to keep them for yourself and prevent other people from using them, it's a good idea to register those.
What can you register a trademark for?
For anything that distinguishes your goods and services from other people's goods and services, that's a trademark. And if it is distinguishable, then it's capable of being registered. Descriptive trademarks, that's a mark that describes the goods and services or describes some inherent quality of the goods and services.
What is the difference between the two?
We don't like, in general, descriptive trademarks. They're heavily disfavored. They are, in some circumstances, registerable, but I really encourage my clients to come up with distinctive trademarks rather than descriptive trademarks. Before you adopt a trademark, you need to make sure that nobody else is already using it. Because if somebody is, and then you start using it, you're actually infringing their trademark. If it sounds the same, then it's the same. You can't just say, well, I'm spelling it with a K, or I put an S on the end.
And that's a whole thing with the infringement battles and litigation and what you've been through with those battles.
Oh, yeah. When you use a trademark, you actually have what are called common law trademark rights. If you're using a trademark and you like your trademark, you can keep your trademark, but you better register your trademark.
And I'm thinking, like, what about the people that would also get the GoDaddy domain for it as well and just sit on that domain?
That happens too. I tell my clients, listen, before I file this, get all the social media handles you want, get all of the domain names you want, because once we file a trademark application, if it's a cool trademark, people are going to go gobble up all those things.
Angela, it's been so fun.
Take care.
Have a good one. What's up, everybody? Happy Wednesday in the Al Nicoletti Studio live, 9 p.m. Eastern. Another week. Man, are the weeks flying by or what? I mean, this week flew by. It's crazy. And we're almost in April. Show's rolling on. I'm excited. More guests to come. And I got to say, if you missed any of that content with Angela Langlots last week, mind-blowing. For those that are in the content game, that have branding, trademarks, anything with logos and or creative design, you got to watch that, because a lot of people are not thinking about what happens when you just create a name for a business and then you start doing the logos, or what happens when you put your content out there and what do you do to make sure that it's copyrighted, and do you have to send it in? Do you have to register? So many little tips and tricks that you can lock in on from Angela's episode. Check that out. And of course, you can check out all the content, scan the QR code. We got the link tree. And again, as I say on all the episodes now, if you are enjoying this episode and you find value in this episode, share it. Feel free. Share it on the Facebook pages, your Facebook. If you're watching on YouTube, share the link with a family member, a friend, somebody that's trying to get in the game or really wants to enhance their learning with this. That's what it's about. That's what we try to do with everybody on the show, is provide value to the community. So check that out there. And tonight, oh my gosh, I got the Tom Barry on the show. Like, this is crazy. I met Tom at the New View conference back in 21. I think it was one of the first conferences that came out after COVID. And I remember I spoke, but then I saw Tom speak and I was like, man, this guy is super knowledgeable about loans and getting in the commercial markets and just understanding markets. And this is the kind of guest that you really want to sit down and learn from, because what he brings can help you understand the fluctuations in the real estate market, what to really look for, and how to prepare yourself in these moments that when they come to you, these opportunities, you gotta seize it. And he's going to talk about this, get into commercial properties, shopping centers, and loans. It's going to be awesome. I got to say, quick opening thoughts. One thing I got to remind people of is stay uncomfortable. And what I mean by that is you really got to stay laser focused and dialed in on anything in your business, inside, internally, and externally. As soon as you start becoming comfortable, what happens when you get comfortable? You get lazy. And what happens when you get lazy? Things start to unravel and fall apart. And then you go, oh my gosh, I got to get back to it, right? How many people are in business and entrepreneurs that fall into that trap? Maybe once a week or once a month, and you all of a sudden fall back and go, wait a second, we got to dial in, refocus, re-energize. And so I say that because when you start scaling your business and you have team members, you start realizing you really need to be on it all the time. Just when you think you can step back, can't step back. Be on it. Stay uncomfortable. Be focused. Dial in. And I hope that helps you all out there. All right. I'm ready for the show. I'm ready for the episode. I got my pen. I got my paper. I hope you all do too, right? Like I'm always taking notes because when you get these guests, there's so much to talk about, so many follow-up questions. So I'm locked and loaded. Let's rock this thing. Hey, everybody. My name is Al Nicoletti. I'm an attorney here in Florida, and welcome to the Al Nicoletti Show, where I bring on real estate super investors, rising rock stars, movers and shakers, and leaders of clubs in their communities that educate, entertain, and inspire all things on Florida real estate. And we are constantly going to bring you the best in the game, whether we're getting into commercial, shopping centers, loans, whether we're getting to Airbnbs or anything with like pad split, all these new hot topics out there that a lot of people hear about. We want to provide the best value to you on how you can take your company to the next level. On my show today, I got the Tom Barry, the man that is going to talk about things with shopping centers and loans. So knowledgeable. Take notes, ask questions, ask them live. And without further ado, let's welcome him to the show. Tom, we did it.
We did it. How's it going, Al?
It's going. I'm locked and loaded, ready for this episode, ready to learn more about what you're getting into. And Tom, as I alluded on the intro, we met at the New View conference 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago. And what a different market it was back then. And then we got to catch up. And I'm like, Tom, since New View, what have you been focusing on? We got to hear about that.
Well, wow, you're right. It is definitely a different market than it was back then. A lot of things have changed. I think probably the most notable is interest rates, right? Man, have they changed since then. But so what have we been focused on? We've just been writing a lot of loans. You know, that's kind of what I do to just keep the money working, right? We just lend all the time. And then when there are opportunities to buy real estate, when something is on sale, I say, then we'll jump in and we'll start buying. But if there's nothing really exciting and on sale, I just lend. And I'm happy just sitting back on the sidelines, lending, keeping everything rocking, keeping everything moving, but waiting for that next opportunity. But when it hits, it hits. So we found an opportunity about 18 months ago. We've been buying shopping centers, as you had mentioned. And man, that's been going really well for us. Our note funds that a lot of passive investors invest in with us, we probably doubled those in the last 2.5 years. We're over about 115 million now in those that we manage. And that's been real good for us and our investors. So that's basically the three things that we're focused on.
Hey, that's great, right? It's different than what a lot of other people are focused on. And I know you talked about one thing on the call that we had, which is understanding the cycles of real estate, right? You've been in this game long enough to start seeing there's these cycles that come and go, and the real estate market's going to be there. It's just following those cycles. So talk a little bit about that before we get into the two big topics.
Sure. You know, I've always called myself a cycle investor. And like I just mentioned in the intro, I think lending is the one thing that you can do in any market, because there are so many things that we can do to affect the risk of a loan. But when it comes to buying a physical asset, there's only one thing that we can do to affect the risk, and that's get it at a price that makes sense. So while price is the end all be all of purchasing real estate, with lending, you know, we can change the LTV, we can change the LTC, we can change the amount of cash somebody has on hand, we could change the experience level of the borrower, we can change geography and lend in certain areas and not in others. So there are so many, I call them risk reduction levers that we have in our power with lending, it makes lending a full cycle strategy for real estate.
Yeah, and I remember what you talked about, what you love about loans and why you are heavy on lending is because you can control the risk,
Yeah,
right? You can control that risk so you know what direction you want to go or don't want to go, and you will pivot from there, right?
correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
We'll dive in on the loan stuff and we'll dive deeper there. But we got to talk about this, which is, I asked Tom, I'm like, what are you getting into with the commercial side of things, right? And I thought Tom was going to talk about maybe like a multifamily or maybe things with land, and his answer was shopping centers. I'm thinking, ooh, like we haven't had anybody on the show, maybe Neil, talk about shopping centers. And I'm thinking, no, this is like super niched out. So you've been getting into commercial development and redevelopment with shopping centers. We got to break this down. What are you seeing out there with shopping centers?
Well, there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of misconception, I guess, would be a better way to word it. When I say the word shopping centers, your face says it all. It's like, ooh, like, oh my gosh, why would you even look at that? Because, right, haven't you heard of Amazon? I mean, like, shopping centers are dead. Everybody buys online, so why would you want a shopping center? But like you said, we have a very niche, a very, very tight niche that we buy in that is doing extremely well. But because of that misconception that shopping centers are dead, they're out of favor with the market, meaning their prices have fallen. So we're in a position where we're able to pick up, shopping centers that are completely occupied, full of great tenants. And the shopping centers are in great shape. They are not deferred maintenance. They don't have a lot of rehab needs. And we're picking them up at about 80 cents on the dollar. And, a 20% discount on a completely full property that is already cash flowing like crazy, I'll take that all day long. So we're not doing the redevelopment. What we're doing is buying these shopping centers once they have been redeveloped. And we're just holding them for the momentum play.
Yeah, and let's talk about this because I learned this at a multifamily conference, which is talking about the different types of classes when you get into the commercial. You have the A, B, and C. And I asked Tom, I was like, which area? And he's like, well, we're getting into A because A, we have the full occupation of the property, right? So like what type of criteria are you looking at when you get into these shopping centers?
Well, I would not class ours as A. I would probably class ours as B, and simply because the age of build. That's really one of the criterion for deciding whether it's an A class, B class, C class, or they even go to D class. You just don't want to go to those areas, right? But I would classify ours probably all as Bs because of the year build. So we're looking for things that have been built from the 1980s up. And so from 1980s to probably 2000 is where we're going to be. The one we have under contract right now that we'll be closing here in the next probably 30 days, it was built in 1991. So that's very important to us because we want to make sure that we're past the iron pipe and the galvanized water lines and all of that. Because if you're buying stuff from the mid 80s and up, you're all in Schedule 40 PVC and you don't have all of that stuff to deal with. So that's why we like that class. And because they're not A, we can still get them at a really good discount.
So what do you do to find that type of market that has the lucrative terms or those types of properties? Like, where are you finding the gold when it comes to shopping centers?
It's going to be a completely different answer than what you would expect because commercial is completely different than single family in this way. It's pretty much the only way they're different, really. But in single family, we always want to get direct to the seller, right? We got to get direct to the seller. It's got to be off market. But honestly, in the commercial space, when you're dealing with properties of $2 million or more in value, you really want to go through brokers. You really don't even want to go direct to seller because brokers control the trade in the commercial space. So what we do is we spend a lot of time building relationships with brokers that we think might at some point have a deal that fits our buy box and our criteria. So we're just pounding the phone and talking to a lot of brokers and building those relationships and sending them our buy box, letting them know that, hey, we're still out here. Hey, we've got capital. We're looking to place the next one you get, send it to us first. And that's how we get them.
Has it just been as simple as just reaching out to the brokers, just forming
It
those
is.
relationships, going to events?
Yeah, it is. It's that simple. I'm not doing anything more exciting than that.
So while a lot of people are like cold calling for like the single families,
Right.
You're trying to build the relationships with the brokers for these kinds of deals, right?
And here's why. In when we did single family, that's exactly what we were doing. We were cold calling, we were door knocking, we were sending letters, sending postcards, bandit sign. I mean, we did all of that in single family. But I tested a few of the single family techniques in the commercial space, and they don't work. They did not work at all. We tested several of them for like 6 months. They did not transfer from the single family to the other asset classes. What we found is when we did get to a actual decision maker, the first thing they did was called their friend, the broker, and said, here, call this guy. He's interested in our property. And I'm like, what the hell are we doing? Spending all this time and effort getting direct to the seller when he's just going to turn us over to his broker anyway. We just need to start there. They're the ones that control the commercial real estate.
So let's back up a little bit. How did you even get into this type of asset class? Like, how did you decide, wait a second, I don't want to focus on all the other things that are going on. I just really want to hone in on shopping centers, because that is not really that common of a niche, right? Like, did you just start seeing things in the market trends? Did you just start, you hearing about it from other people? What was like that indicator? Because a lot of people that are in real estate are always trying to find that next thing that could break the barriers, right? Maybe it's commercial with the way that loans are, you name it. How did you just see this?
Well, I'm always studying. I'm a student of this business. Like you said earlier, you're a student. I'm still a student. I've been doing this for 20 years. This is all I've done for 20 years. But I'm always watching the market on various asset classes, looking for the next sale. Right. I look at real estate just like a woman, and I'll pick on ladies for a minute. Like a woman might look at shopping for clothing, right? If you're a bargain hunter and you're going to the mall, you're looking for a sale. You're not looking for a specific clothing. You're looking for a good deal. Well, that's the way I shop for real estate. So for me, it's what asset class is going to go on sale next. And there, trust me, there were a couple that went on sale prior to us getting to shopping centers. We just passed on those. One of them was hotel motel. It went on sale in 2020, 2021. As you might imagine, with all the crazy COVID shutdowns, shutting down the entire world, people couldn't travel. So, the hotel and motel owners were just slaughtered. And if somebody wanted to pick up a portfolio of those, you could have picked them up for 50 cents on the dollar, seriously, over the last few years. Now, most of that has worked its way out of the market now. It's not quite that good today as it would have been a couple of years ago. But we passed on that opportunity because hotel motel, for all of its pros, the con to it is it's a business within real estate. It's not just real estate. It is an active daily business within real estate, which makes it a management intensive asset class. And at this point in my life, I did not want to go down that road. I'm like, I'll wait for an easier one. And the next easier one was office. And that one is still in free fall. I don't know where the bottom is going to land. I think we're close to the bottom, but I'm not in the habit of trying to catch a falling knife. And that's what I feel like office is right now. It's a falling butcher knife, and I'm not fast enough to reach in there and grab it. So I'm going to let that one sit for a minute. We may pivot to it down the line, But the next deal that we saw coming was shopping centers, and that one fit my appetite perfectly. So, yeah.
Tom, when it comes to metrics, when you're talking about maybe getting into office, is there something that you're looking for that's going to signal we're in?
Yeah, occupancy rates. I'm watching occupancy rates in various markets that we would be interested in. And when those occupancy rates start ticking up again, right now they've just been flat, and they've been flat for probably a year and a half or so, give or take, which to me shows me that we have probably bottomed, but we haven't started back up yet. And I'm waiting for the start back up part on that.
Yeah. I know there are several people I've talked to about the office buildings, and they were like, well, we're going to maybe wait on it. It's not really in the right trends to like go after that right now. So just following the occupancy. And I know you talked about this, which is if in order for you to get into the shopping centers, it's got to be 100% occupied on the day of purchase. Otherwise it isn't a buy, right?
Well, it's got to be 80% or higher for us to purchase. And that's in our written buy box. Now, the two that we have purchased and the one we currently have under contract have all been 100%. But that's not really, I don't have to have 100, but damn, it's nice. I'm not going to turn it down either.
Right. Who's not going to? Everybody's going to go after that, of course. But the really interesting thing that really piqued my interest when you were talking about going after shopping centers was the fact that you're going after ones with value add, right? The
Yeah,
value add, the way that the lots are, so that the out parcels then can become other little structures too. And I remember seeing this in Miami, where there is a shopping center, and all of a sudden on the outskirts of the parking lot, there's a bank. Then there's like a little coffee shop. Then there's all these
sure.
other things. And then you're talking about it with me. And I'm like, well, that makes a lot of sense, that those are great opportunities. What is the real, what's the grab with the value add shopping centers when you can do that?
Well, I'm looking for two value adds. The first one you mentioned, and that is developing outlots. So by developing outlots, all that simply means is that we have enough ground in front of the shopping center, between the center and the road, that we could carve off a chunk of that, or several chunks of it if it's enough, and we can do multiple things with it, right? We have three options. We could sell a little chunk of it. And currently we have one under contract right now at one of our shopping centers. And they are going to put a Dunkin' Donuts on it. Well, that's a great opportunity for us, first of all, because we got a nice chunk of money for a piece of pavement in front of our center that we do nothing with. It's literally free money for us. But more than that, it also drives traffic into our center for the rest of our tenants. And that adds value to the center. So while we're selling off a piece of it, we're actually adding value at the same time, which you would think, well, that's impossible to do, but it's not when you think that through. The other thing that we could do with it is we could ground lease it. We could chunk off that section, and instead of selling it for a Dunkin' Donut, we could tell the developers, hey, we'll lease that ground to you for so much a foot on a 50-year lease or a 100-year lease or whatever. And that obviously, again, adds value to our center, because now we have additional cash flow and income for quite some time. And again, pulls in more traffic for the rest of our tenants. And then the third thing we could do is we could take that chunk of land and we could go ahead and develop it ourselves and do a build to suit for, let's say, that same Dunkin' Donut, right? Where we would build to suit. And then we would not only just lease them the ground, we would lease them the ground and the building that we have built to their specs on a long-term lease. All three are wins for us, and all three are wins for the rest of our tenants. So that's the first value add that I look for. The second value add I look for, most people would probably miss if they haven't been trained in this. We look for opportunities to rehab the leases. The leases, just the lease structure and how they're written, make up a huge percentage of the value of a property. And a lot of, particularly mom and pop owners, They don't know how to write leases. They're just using an old lease they've had for 30 years, and they don't want to, engage an attorney to do it properly. So they just wing it, and they make a mess of their leases, which is great for us, because if they have good tenants in there that are doing good business, right, those tenants don't want to leave. So we come in and we structure a really strong lease, a really tight lease, and on a longer time frame. And we could literally add an enormous value, I mean, in the millions of dollars of value to that property, simply by not even touching the physical asset itself, but rehabbing the paper in it. So that's the second value add that we look for.
That's different. I like that. That's something
Well, as an attorney, I assumed you would like that, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy to think that somebody's going into a shopping center business and has a shoddy lease, right? But there's a lot of people that also don't know how to manage properties. And like you said, they don't know how to manage maybe it's hotels or office buildings. And so that's why there's always going to be buyers and sellers, because just because you have the capital to buy it doesn't mean you understand how to manage it or have the right people and experts to help you get into it. So that's huge. I thought that was really cool when you were telling me about that, like that it's not just the building itself, it's all these other things that you can do on the property that make it great. One quick thing before we jump into loans, any interesting case study story that you could tell us about the first one that you bought?
Yeah, the first one we bought that thing. It was a 10% cap rate back when interest rates weren't even high yet. So it was literally a steal when we bought it. And the hair on this deal, the thing that kept people away from it, was about 26% of it was a courthouse. Actually, it's the county courthouse. It's there because the real courthouse was destroyed in a hurricane several years ago. And so they've been in the center ever since, while they're building the new courthouse. And everybody that looked at this property knew that that courthouse was leaving. That's going to make a huge vacancy. And they were scared that they wouldn't be able to fill it back up again, right? So what we did is we started marketing that space immediately. And we are currently in talks back and forth. Well, we're not in talks. We have terms. We have an LOI signed by us and a national tenant. And the attorneys are going back and forth on the finer points of the contract right now. But once we get that lease all buttoned up, we'll have that space backfilled. And we'll probably have that done, I'm going to say, by the end of this month. Once the back and forth is done, that's the end of March. And the courthouse isn't leaving until the end of August this year. We're going to turn it over to the new tenants January 1, 2025. So was it a bad thing that they were leaving? No, it wasn't, because we're getting way more rents. And now we have a national credit tenant. So we have not only rehabbed the lease, but we also rehabbed the tenant mix. And we have added more value to that property just by bringing in a nationally recognized tenant and putting them in there. And again, they're going to drive even more traffic in for the rest of the tenants in the building. So those are some of the cool stuff that you're able to do with these. And it's just a lot of fun.
It seems like it. It seems like the stability itself is also the value add, right? The fact that you're going to now bring in somebody that's going to sign a long-term lease and be that anchor tenant there, not going anywhere, seems to be attractive to other people that maybe want to rent out in that shopping center as well.
I think the other thing that I really enjoy about shopping centers is that these leases are most generally a triple net lease, which means we pass all the extra costs through to the tenant, and they pay their own way. They pay their pro rata share of the taxes. They pay their pro rata share of the property insurance. They pay their pro rata share of the common area maintenance of the building. So as these costs are going crazy right now, particularly insurance and taxes, right? it does not burden us as the owners of the property. We do everything in our power to shop and make sure that we get good rates, on the insurance, and we do everything in our power to protest taxes and try to keep them as low as we can for the tenants. But at the end of the day, whatever it ends up, it's not on us, it's on them. And I think that's really different than a lot of other asset classes out there. Whether it's apartment buildings or whether it's single family homes or even office buildings, most generally are not written that way.
I feel like we could talk about this for 2 hours on shopping centers. Dive into like the leases that you have to have and everything that you need to know, right? There's so much to talk about, but this is just a little glimpse into this world. And then as soon as I heard it, I said, we got to share this. Tom, just awesome stuff with shopping centers. I'm always intrigued to see what you do on your adventures and where it's going to go a year, 2 years down the road, and how many more you're going to acquire, and also what you're going to learn from it as well. Because you always learn from the experiences.
Definitely.
Right?
Definitely.
So let's talk about lending, because we always save the best for last on the show. This is your area. This is the big area for Tom, and you're seeing a lot of moving pieces, especially in this market, right?
Yeah.
We'll start with like when you're getting into loans, looking at the risk mitigation, right? The risk mitigation levers is something that you love talking about. What should people look for when they jump into lending or thinking about getting into loans or finding loans, all of that?
Yeah, I mean, from a lender standpoint, it's all about risk mitigation, right? That's rule number one for lending. So how does a bank do that, right? Banks are the biggest lenders out there. We all know that. Well, they require an enormous amount of information about the borrower, about the property. I mean, usually there's a blood test involved, a urine sample. It takes, months and months and months to get through that process for that banker to finally squeeze that check out of his hand to you. And we wonder, well, why is that process so arduous? Why is that process so hard? Well, because bankers go through training to mitigate risk. In fact, I would argue they go through training to eliminate risk, right? If there is any risk whatsoever, they don't want to be involved in it. Well, as a private money lender, we don't eliminate risk, but we certainly have to mitigate it. We have to reduce it to a reasonable level. So what we're looking at first is the property. That's the first thing I look at is this property a property that if Al doesn't pay me back and I'm going to end up with the property, do I want that? Right. And if the answer is no, you probably shouldn't lend on it. Right. If you're lending to somebody and you're looking at that deal and you're going, God, I hope I don't end up with this. Well, that's a mistake waiting to happen. Don't do that. So that would be my first advice to private lenders. And I've made that mistake. I'm speaking from experience here. I've crossed my fingers and hoped, but the old adage, hope is not a strategy, right? And it's not a strategy in lending either. Just hoping that this deal doesn't go bad is probably not a good strategy. So you look at that property and is it something that I would be excited to own? And is it something that I could turn into at least the same amount that I have into that loan? It could get my money back, right? Now that might be, maybe you're a rehabber or a flipper and you're qualified to go in and finish the project yourself and put it on the market and sell it retail. Well, in that case, you might be in a position where if the deal went sideways, you would end up with more at the end, right? But if you're somebody who is not experienced in that, then I would say to you, you probably want to stay with what we call powder puff deals, right? A paint and carpet deal, something that doesn't need an enormous amount of rehab, because that's something you could hire any general contractor in your area or, maybe a handyman or somebody to go in and finish that project for you. And then again, you can recoup your money back. But it's all about recouping your money back. It's Warren Buffett's number one rule of investing. Don't lose money, right? And in lending, not losing money is having the correct collateral to make sure that you can recoup your investment. Now, then, if I'm comfortable with that, then I start looking at the actual person, the borrower. And there, we can look at credit score, we can look at cash on hand, we can look at loan to value, we can look at loan to cost, we can look at how heavy a lift, how heavy a rehab is this thing. We could look at, experience level, how many deals in the last 24 months have they done, and are they of similar size and nature to this one? All of those are also great tools for us to further reduce our risk, right? And if those things all play out, then you've got the makings of a pretty good loan. And you've also got the makings of a loan that if it doesn't go well, you're still going to end up with your shirt, right? You'll at least be able to get your money back out of it.
Yeah. I was writing down property, project, people, and then I realized, wait a second, you had the 3 Ps that you wanted to talk about. And I think we were right there. Right? Like that's how you're analyzing whether to get into that type of loan. The risk involved, the people, the types of properties. And I think what's happening right now, and we'll talk about this, I think a lot of investors or people that have just accumulated money over the years, compound interest, are starting to tap into their accounts, their IRAs, to really get into lending, because there's a lot of people out there that have money that can lend out of their IRA, and people are looking for others to help them on projects, right? So
absolutely.
If you're thinking about it like you are as the lender, this is what you're looking at. And if you're thinking about it as the borrower, there's criteria to all of this. Tom, what are the different types of loans for lending? Because I know you talked about this before, the fact that they're not all created equal.
Yeah. So right now we basically have 4 different buckets of loans. The first one would be your single family fix and flip bucket. And, that's the oldest product we have. That's what we started with. We had one product and we offered it in one city, and that was Houston, Texas. And then we just kind of grew from there. Now we lend in 24 different states. But that's our favorite product because that's the one we started with. And it has certainly evolved over time as the market has evolved and as interest rates have evolved, as competition has evolved. We constantly have to look at what's the market doing and what is our competition doing and so forth, so that we can stay relevant and we can stay competitive with our products. So that's the fix and flip. And then I guess the sister to that would be the DSCR product, the debt service coverage ratio loan that we offer for single family homes. And that's something that somebody would use if they wanted to buy and hold, or if they wanted to fix it up to hold it as a rental. They might use the fix and flip and then use us to refinance it into the DSCR or a long-term loan. And that could be a 5-year, it could be a 20, it could be a 30-year loan. So that covers the single family side. But most of our capital actually goes to the other ones, and that's the commercial loans. We love commercial as a buyer, and we love commercial as a lender. So about 85%, the last time I looked at least, of our loans on the street, dollars that is in commercial. And is not collateralized by single family. So we have a lot of commercial paper out there, and we really like that product. And it's kind of been a niche for us that most other hard money lenders and private lenders are not comfortable with. So the only reason we are is because we've been a buyer of that type of property for years. So again, owning that asset doesn't scare us. If it does, we don't want to do the loan in the first place. So in that area, it could be raw land that people are subdividing and selling off in pieces. It could be an entire subdivision. We lent on a piece in Dallas. It was about 306 acres. They put roads in, they put the underground infrastructure in, and then they sold off the lots to a builder to do spec homes. And that was a really great project for them and for us. Ground up construction of an apartment complex outside of Dallas. Tulsa, we lent on an old Kmart building that was turned into an indoor cannabis grow facility. In Southern Texas, we did a Sears building, an old empty Sears building that was turned into a World's Gym. Um, we've done a lot of cool redevelopment projects over the years. I could go on and on, but those are some of the examples of the ones that pop to mind first.
Yeah, talk about the stress. Sears. Is Sears even around?
You know, I don't know. I don't know if there are any out there yet or not. What I thought was funny is when Sears merged with Kmart because they thought that was going to help them. That one I'm still scratching my head on.
Forgot all about Kmart. How fast things go, right? Fast it all goes. But yeah, I hear everything you're talking about with this. And how are you helping investors leverage some of these other ways that they can start doing lending or start lending, whether they're on the smaller projects or the bigger projects? Like, what have you seen on maybe a basic level, intermediate level, somewhere in between? How are you helping?
Well, it used to be when we were smaller, we would work with somebody and say, "Hey, you know, we'll write the loan, we'll do all the due diligence on it, and then once we're sure that it's a good loan, then we can use your money on it, and we'll just, you know, take a little spread for doing all the due diligence and so forth." And that really worked well for us. It worked well for the investor, the passive investor, that is, that didn't really have the wherewithal to run a loan through the paces and know if it's a good loan or a horrible loan, right? But as we got bigger, that was not scalable. And I'm all about scale. I don't want to do anything if it isn't scalable. So what we did is we opened a couple of private real estate funds, and we put those loans in these funds. And we have passive investors will just put money in those funds, and they are actually an owner of their pro rata share of all the notes that are in those two funds. So we have one for the fix and flip stuff, and we have one for the DSCR stuff. The fix and flip is called the growth fund. We make it real easy. The DSCR is called the income fund, and they return a really good rate of return to our investors, and it's interest income. It's just as if they were doing the loans themselves, only they don't have to. They have professional management doing those loans. And we're still returning a yield to the investor that's very similar, if not more, than what they would probably be able to get on their own.
That's interesting. You know, Tom, kind of tying in the lending side with the shopping centers, because this is kind of like going towards that loan area. What are you looking for when you get into these commercial projects? What are you looking for in terms of lending in interest rate terms? Because with these bigger projects, bigger numbers, I mean, these are giant loans. These aren't like $100,000 loans. These are $1 million loans.
Yeah.
And you're talking about the interest rates that are going to be different. So tying both worlds in on that lending side with that knowledge, now you can look for favorable terms on these deals. What are you looking for?
So I have a little rule of thumb that I use. It's I don't want to call it a trick, but it's a shortcut, right? It's a shortcut. So, and I love a shortcut. I love something that I can use and do quick math in my head and say, is this even worth my analytics? Is it even worth me running it through the paces to do the full on pro forma on this project? And what I have found, and it has worked so far 100%, not saying it always will, is that if I know what my fixed debt number is, and I'll just use the one we have under contract that will be closing next month. Our lender has committed that they are going to lend to us at 8% interest on that deal. And this is a 130,000 square foot shopping center. It's a big center. And it's a $15 million purchase. They're going to lend us 10,600,000. The rest we're going to raise in equity. So I know this, if I know what my interest rate is and I add 200 basis points, that is the least I will accept in a cap rate. So on that particular deal, it's an 8% interest rate. I know I need to buy that at a 10 cap or better, because if I can add 200 basis points to that, we are going to make money hand over fist. When I say me, we, that's us and our passive investors that are chipping in with us to go in on that deal. So what did we buy that at? We bought it at a 10.1 cap. So it's 210 basis points. That is a solid deal, and I'll buy those all day long. So knowing that, I don't really care what the interest rate is because I'm not paying it. My investors and I don't ever pay the interest rate. The seller does, because I'm going to make them discount the price to cover the interest rate. And we actually got a fixed 7-year loan on that, amortized over 30 years, but it's a 7-year fixed rate. And we only plan to hold it 5 years. So we'll never have to refi. We'll never have to worry about rates rising. We don't have to worry about anything on that project. And I know my investors and I are safe from fluctuating interest rates.
Boy, there's a lot to analyze when getting into this kind of stuff. And so your background on that really helps you analyze this deal, right? And what's intriguing too is that you already know the duration of how long you're going to stay in that deal. Like, you know that you're not going to be in there for 10 to 15 years. You already have it in your mind of this is, I mean, that's relatively short period of time, 5 years, right?
Yeah.
And out. So you are playing with those numbers, knowing in your mind there's an exit strategy, right? How important is it for investors to not just think about getting into deals, but also thinking about getting out of deals as well?
I go into everything with the end in mind. I that's just the way I think. It's the way I was taught. I came from the financial planning world, so this is just old hat to me, because I always taught people to think with the end in mind and then plan backwards, right, to get to there. And it's the same thing in real estate. When I'm buying a house or when I'm buying a shopping center, I'm buying an apartment complex, I always have the end in mind. Is this something I want to hold forever? Is this what we call, in our family, we call it a legacy property? Because we do have some of those. We have things that I intend to leave to my kids, and maybe they'll decide to leave them to my grandkids. I don't know. We'll leave that up to them. But there are others that I'm like, no, we need to get out of this one in 5 years, because we will have fully depreciated at that point and we won't have any more tax value out of that thing. So let's dump it and move to the next one so we can start that depreciation with a cost seg. So all of those factors factor into when you exit.
Yeah. Exiting is something that I didn't understand until I went to a mastermind, because I'm thinking when everybody's getting into deals, it's like you're in the deals, but then you got to think about, well, what happens next, right? What about in 10 years, 5 years? What's the exit strategy then? And so ever since, I'm always thinking in my mind about, all right, if you're getting into something, how are you getting out of it?
How are you getting out?
How are you getting out, right? Whether it's a contract, whether it's a project, you have to think about the ins and outs. And that's great. Tom, you've done when it comes to loans, you've done, how much have you done in loans?
I think back last year, we crossed the 1 billion mark. We did like 300 and some million last year. So yeah, it's a few. We've done a few loans.
A few.
I think we got it down now. I think we got it down now.
Small number. Well, this is huge. If you had to give one piece of advice just on the lending side of people maybe wanting to jump in or tap into some kind of source, what would that lending advice be?
So I would say on the lending side, if you're wanting to start lending yourself, if your due diligence on each loan doesn't fill at least 2 inches of a 3-ring binder, you're not doing enough due diligence. Because we printed ours out recently and it's 4 inches thick on every loan. That is our due diligence on every loan. It's 4 inches thick.
Wow.
So if you're not doing that kind of due diligence, you're fixing for a problem. Right, you're setting yourself up for an issue. And if you're lending as an acquisition model, then that's okay, because if you're lending it as an acquisition model, you hope that they fail, so you end up with the property. If that's your goal, then by all means do very little due diligence, because it will happen. Uh, but if that's not your model, if that's not your goal, and if you don't want to end up with that property, make sure you're really crossing your T's and dotting your I's. We're pulling background checks and LexisNexis, and we're, checking title and getting title insurance, and we're, oh my gosh, credit report and financials. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to look at, to know, is this a deal that we want to do or not?
A lot of due diligence. That's a lot.
And if you don't want to do all that, then get with a lender that is already doing that, whether it's us or somebody else, right? There are thousands of us across the country that do it well. Get with another lender and say, how can I lend my money alongside you and just ride your due diligence coattails? And we all welcome that. We all welcome somebody to come along. You bring the capital, we'll bring the loan and the due diligence for it. We're going to make a few percent. You're going to make the bulk of it. You're going to make the rest of it.
Great. I think this is all great. And actually, we have questions like rolling in here.
All right, good deal.
Yeah, we got live interaction. So just a couple shout outs. Kevin's watching. Mark Monroe. Mark. Hey, he's watching tonight. Love it. Hey, Teresa. Teresa says, I miss Sears and Kmart getting the Craftsman tools at Sears when they had a lifetime guarantee. Yep.
I agree. I totally agree.
All those great department stores. My producer, Michael, he said, how does it work if there's another business operating inside the same unit as one of your own tenants? Thinking of when Little Caesars was inside of Kmart or Starbucks inside of Target.
Most generally, and it can be done different ways, but most generally in those instances, Kmart is leasing the entire building and they're subleasing to Little Caesars or McDonald's, most generally. So the building owner is just leasing the entire building to Kmart, and then they can do whatever they want on the inside of it. And they're setting up those other little, let's call them out parcels, right, inside their building to either drive extra traffic or just pick up extra rent from small spaces in the store. And the rent per square foot that they're charging Little Caesars is far, far greater than the rent per square foot they're paying for the building.
Yeah, they're going to make sure they make their money off that. Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good question, Mike. Love it. Somebody asked, do you use your money or OPM?
Yes. We do both. when we started, it was OPM, because quite honestly, when I got in real estate, I didn't have any of my own to use. And that's just the honest truth when we started 20 years ago. Now we do both. We make sure that we have a particular share, and it depends on which fund I'm talking about, in the fund, so that all of our investors understand that our money is right beside their money. So for example, on our shopping centers, if we're going to raise $5 million, like we are on this particular one we're buying right now, the first 10% is our money. So the first $500,000 was ours in that deal. And that makes all of our passive investors a little bit warm and fuzzy. They know, hey, they believe in this deal enough to put their own money in it. And quite honestly, if you're looking at a fund or a syndication and that sponsor or a fund manager doesn't do that, I'd run. I personally would not put my money in if you're not going to put yours in with mine. So yeah, we do now use our own capital along with other people's capital.
Cool. And the same person said, do you lend personal or to your LLCs?
We lend to LLCs most generally. There are a few exceptions, but we like to lend to LLCs. It depends on state law. Some state law, we really have to make sure that there's a distinction between a business purpose loan and a consumer loan. And then in other states like Texas here, it does not matter. So it really depends on the state, but we like an LLC.
Cool. PMSO is on a roll right now. So a person would have to personally guarantee.
With one exception, yes. We do want a personal guarantee on the loans, of course, and our investors want that. So that again is just a layer of protection for our investors in our funds. However, the one exception is if you're trying to borrow in your IRA. If you have a self-directed IRA at one of the self-directed IRA custodians, we will lend to your IRA to buy a piece of real estate. And obviously, we can't ask for a personal guarantee because an IRA loan would have to be a non-recourse loan. So what we do there to cover that risk, remember risk mitigation, I'm going to ratchet one of those risk mitigation levers down. And instead of lending you at 70% LTV, I'm going to ratchet it down to 60 and not require a personal guarantee on an IRA. So I've reduced my risk and still been able to give you the ability to get that loan in your IRA. Everybody's happy.
Boy, yeah, there's a lot of thinking through these kinds of things. Same person said, "What if someone borrows funds for a project and then they get hit with an SAR? Do you have a built-in clause to protect a borrower?"
Explain SAR. I don't know what she or he means by that.
I don't know, but their next question was, "Do you cross collateralize real estate or RE personal guarantee?"
Cross collateralize. In some odd cases, we can, but not generally. Not generally. Most generally, if somebody borrows against a particular property, that's the property they're putting up. Now, cross collateralization would come into play if somebody doesn't have enough collateral on the property that they need the money for. And I say, look, I'd love to lend to you. Everything else looks good here, but you don't have enough collateral. What else do you have? And maybe they have something that's already paid off that they could pledge as well, and we can put a lien on it too. Now I can at least give them that loan so they can get that project finished. So we've had a few instances where we've been able to do that, but most generally it's just a loan on the property that the money's going into.
Cool. Teresa says, piggybacking off Michael's question and using his example, do you welcome / allow your tenants to sublease? If so, what do you ask for when they do that?
So I assume we're talking about shopping centers. And yes, there is typically a sublease clause in those leases. We just ask that they come to us with the same things that we asked for when they came in. So they're going to have to go through an application process, just like the original tenant would. And here's why. We want to protect the rest of the tenants in the building. Oftentimes, there is something called co-tenancy clauses in a lease. And those co-tenancy clauses are going to, there are also, that's going to come into play every time we bring in a new tenant, whether it's a subtenant or a actual tenant. There are also restriction clauses. The new lease that we're working on right now, one of the oddities in that was that they want to restrict and say that there can never be a video arcade in our center if they are in there. Now, I don't know what they have against video arcades, but that is one of the clauses. So imagine if somebody is already leasing from me and then they move out and sublease to a video arcade. Well, now I'm in default as the landlord with my tenant that I have sworn through the lease that I would never bring a video arcade into the center. So all of those things come into play, and we have to look at each one of those before saying yes to a sublease. It's not that we're trying to say no. We just want to check everything to make sure that we're not violating anything that we have agreed to with anybody else in the center.
Definitely goes back to the due diligence, right? Making sure all these are checked off and that you're not stepping on anybody's toes. By the way, they said SAR is suspicious activity report based on the Corporate Transparency Act. So we'll back up. What if someone borrows funds for a project and then they get hit with this SAR? Do you have a built-in clause to protect a borrower?
This Transparency Act is still so new. We don't even know exactly how this is playing out. There are a couple court cases right now on this thing. So no, we do not have that figured yet. Our attorneys are telling us to hold off and let's see what happens with these court cases. Obviously, there are certain things, if we set up a new LLC or something this particular calendar year, we can't hold off because we have 90 days to get that thing registered. But other than that, we're not registering anything that was pre-24 until the end of the year, until our attorneys say, all right, now you got to do it. So yeah, that's where we're at on that.
Yeah, I just got off a call the other day with Bob Bloom, and he was explaining that to me, and I was like, "What is this whole thing?" And there's a lot of people waiting, and then he explained the whole like if you do the entity this year, you get 90 days. I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" So everybody's waiting for those court rulings for sure. Well, you can tell that if you've got questions on this for Tom, you reach out. We'll make sure his content's up there. And this is great stuff, Tom. I mean, we could, like I said, we can keep going on and on about this because there's so much to talk about.
I can do this all night. I can do this all night, Al.
I can tell, like at the New View conference, you can just keep going. Tom, at the end of my shows, I've been doing some signature questions. Give us your best answer. We didn't go over this on the onboarding, but you ready?
I'm ready. Fire.
What will you never compromise on with your business?
My integrity. I tell this to my adult kids who I'm training in this business as well. I tell this to all the younger guys that I mentor. My most valuable asset is my reputation. It's more valuable than any building I currently own or any building that I will ever buy. That is my most valuable asset. It has made me more money than any other building will ever make me, any piece of real estate or any business. So that is very easy for me to quickly answer. What will I never give on? My integrity. If I can't do something, I'm going to be straight up. If I've got bad news, I'm going to be straight up. And that's the way I am. And that's the way I want all the people that I do business to be as well.
Couldn't agree more. Love that answer. Oh, Tom, what are the biggest challenges you face in your business?
One of the biggest challenges, I think, is just navigating the constant change in the market. It's a lot of work to keep up with it. So I probably read 4 to 5 hours a day, business news and articles and so forth. I probably have 8 business apps on my phone. I'm just constantly reading. I'm not much into social media, but if I am, I'm finding articles there that I'm reading. So I'm a junkie when it comes to this stuff. And I think that's the biggest challenge is knowing where we're headed and what's coming next. But I think we have to be a student of it or else we get crushed by it. So that's probably my biggest challenge.
Yeah.
Not any of my 50 employees or so at all. No.
Right. All the other internal things with business. Tom, it's funny. I think it was Brandon's episode. I think I asked about what the top 3 mobile apps he uses for his business. I really should be asking you this question because you have.
No, you shouldn't because I'm not a tech guy. The apps I just mentioned are news apps.
I know.
Okay.
So let's ask this question. What are the top 3 news apps that keep you educated on real estate?
So Wall Street Journal, Fox News, Fox Business, Barron's, Bloomberg, Forbes, Business Insider, One America, Newsmax, and that's on the first screen.
Keeps you updated all the time. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
I'm not going to say I read every article, obviously, but I scan all those apps every day for articles that are relevant to either the economy or real estate or business. And if you read enough, a lot of times the headlines are enough, and I don't even have to go any further. A lot of times it's not because they're misleading. You know, a lot of it's just a bunch of junk clickbait. You know, I read one the other day, and my wife even saw it, and she texted it to me, and it was housing foreclosures skyrocket last month. Now that was the absolutely was what the headline was, and then when you read in it, it wasn't a skyrocket of any kind. It was a blip, literally. but they were just using these big words to try to get people to click on. And it worked for both of us. It worked for both of us because we're in real estate. So
Yeah, they're playing around with metrics to see people clicking that kind of stuff. They want to know. They want to know.
yeah.
All right, with the final signature question, Tom, where do you see the real estate industry in 5 years?
Well, what you got to break that down for me and be more specific, because that is a monster area, real estate, right? Let's be more specific, and I'll give you a very specific answer.
Where do you see the commercial real estate industry in 5 years?
In 5 years, I think most of the current turmoil will be gone, and we'll probably be in some new turmoil. Now, what will that be, and what asset class is it? Don't have a crystal ball. No way we could know in 5 years. The furthest I think anybody can see into the future in this game is about 12 to 18 months. So I can tell you where I think each asset class is going to be in 12 to 18 months. And I can tell you that with fair certainty. But 5 years isn't going to happen. But I do know this. I've never seen a cycle, and I've studied this clear back to the 20s. I have never seen a cycle last more than 5 years. So anything that's in the crapper right now is not going to be in the crapper 5 years from now. So think office buildings. Office buildings will not be in the toilet 5 years from now. They won't. Now, where will they be? I don't know, but it won't be in the toilet, because they're in the toilet now, and cycles don't last that long. They last about 2 years at most. So they're going to be out of the toilet in the next couple of years. And that's going to happen because of a variety of things, probably a different topic.
Yeah, that's a totally different topic. But I love that perspective on how you're viewing it. Not that long, but like, because of all that experience over the years, you're viewing that in that 12 to 18 month frame and seeing it over a shorter period of time. But things bounce back, right? They come and go, and they're gonna come back. Tom, love it. I think this is fascinating stuff. Very interesting. Definitely not my realm, right? This is not my area, but I learn it because we learn it from people like you, the experts, when they come into this field, or you've been doing this for so many years. So just want to say thank you for sharing that. Thank you for coming on and talking about the shopping centers, loans, great stuff. As I do on the end of my show, I do a segment called Final Words, Final Thoughts. Anything that you really want to leave the audience with, maybe to get them thinking, or to just leave them with these parting words. So as I do with all my guests, final words, final thoughts, Tom Barry.
The best time to buy real estate was about 20 years ago. The second best time is tomorrow. Don't sit on the sidelines because of fear. Everybody that's on the sidelines today is fearful. That's the only thing that would keep them on the sidelines. That, and just lack of knowledge. But get knowledgeable and get active, because there is always in every market something that you can do in real estate to make money, whether that's lending, whether that's purchasing various asset classes for various strategies. But there is always something that works. There's always something that makes money. And my last thought is, it's very easy to make money in good markets, but you build most of your wealth in down markets. So that's food for thought.
And we're going to leave it right there. Tom, thank you so much again for coming on. Great catching up with you. Great talking to you a week or 2 weeks ago. And every time I'm talking to you, learning something new, learning another angle, learning something that can really help everybody elevate their business. So thank you again for coming on the show, Tom.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It was fun.
It was so much fun. I'll see you soon, man.
All right. Take care.
All right, everybody. There you go. Shopping centers, loans, and more. There's so much to learn from this episode. There's so much to learn from people like Tom, right? Totally different realm of a topic than we have brought on before. And that is to show you that there's all these other angles out there and all this knowledge that you need to tap into. And when we have guests like Tom, we learn more. We start thinking and going outside of our box and going, wait a second, what else is there? So if you missed any of the episode of Tom, check that out. And of course, you can check out all the content on the show, scan the QR code, the link tree, and support the show. That's right. Scan that QR code right there. And of course, thank you for the questions. Great question, Mike. PMSO, like that was great question. And Teresa, love it. This is what we love on the show, right? The guests, the viewers that are asking questions, interacting. We thrive off that, right? That's what makes it great. That's what energizes the guests and brings them back. So if you miss any of it, check it out. And we'll see you all next Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern when I'm bringing on Bobby Suarez, the massive wholesaler out in Miami doing crazy things. He's going to talk about some really interesting things, not on the external part of his business, but on the internal part. This is a different conversation you don't want to miss. We'll see you next Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern. See you then.